There wasn't too much on this 2009 Kawasaki Vulcan Custom that I didn't fall in love with when I first picked it up. But there is one thing that's kind of been bothering me, and I'm going to modify it a little bit, see if I can't clean it up. And that's this rear flap. Now we all have to have a license plate. We all have to have a light that illuminates it. But to me, there's too much plastic here. I'm going to tighten this up a little bit by moving some things around so that I can bring the license plate up into this area here, so it will actually sit where the existing license plate light and this reflector are right now. Cut off the excess plastic, and I'm going to mount some LED lights up here underneath this fender, so that'll illuminate the license plate. To make this job easier, I'm going to remove this flap from the bike. Now to do that, there are 4 bolts here that you can access from underneath the fender. I also need to disconnect this wire loom. This has the right and left signal lights, the license plate light, all connected in there, and that runs up to underneath the seat. So we're going to disconnect those first, and then we're going to start tearing these apart. When we trace those wires up to the area underneath the seat, we end up with basically 4 connections here. The connection that ultimately is going to be changed is this one here. This is a red and a black with a yellow stripe. According to the schematic, that is the license plate light. The rest of these 2 wire bundles here, that controls your right and left blinker, and this 3 wire bundle here controls the brake light and tail light. Now because these are all connected to that flap, I'm just going to disconnect everything and pull it back through underneath the fender. As you're removing this wire bundle, you'll come across a couple of different attachment types. One of them is just a soft tab, and all you really need to do is just pull that out away a little bit, just so you can get the wire up and out, like so. You'll probably also come across some of these hard wire loops, and depending on how the bike is set up, this one here will come out with the removal of this bolt. There's one up under the fender, and you just kind of have to guide the wires up and around it. Now that the flap is off, we can get going here and start to tear this thing apart. It's important to make sure that you pay attention to the bolts as they come out. All of these bolts are the same length, except there was one bolt here that has 2 flat washers, and that came out of this hole right here. I'm not real sure why. It could be that these others have this additional spacing from these wire clamps, but we want to make sure that we get everything back in the way it was. Now I'm thinking that when I remove these 2 bolts that hold the license plate light, that those holes and these holes will match right up. The only wire bundle I really want to remove out of here is this one here that goes to the license plate light. Now these holes for this license plate bracket line up perfectly with the holes that held the license plate light. I'm not real sure if I'm going to leave these rubber dampeners in there or try and peel them off. I may end up having to flip the rotation of this license plate holder. We're going to play around with this for a bit. If you were hesitant to do any cutting on this and you wanted to keep it intact as much as possible, you could just use this lower portion for this reflector here. Drill a hole in the center there. This little tab would fit right down in one of these holes. And then, you know, you're still gaining a little bit, but you haven't sacrificed this flap. I've bounced around several ideas of how I'm going to do the license plate mount here. A couple of them included using the existing bracket, either upside down or right side up. But I didn't like either one of them because one of them made them angle, and I was afraid that when I put the two new lights in here, I won't get enough illumination. This one is a real candidate. Even though it angles it out, you could always kind of bend the license plate around and take up a gap there. I think I'm going to build my own, and I was thinking about making it out of aluminum, but I happen to have a piece of flat bar stock right here, which is roughly the same width as this. This is going to be a real simple bracket. I'm going to make it the same length, round the edges like you see on here, drill 2 holes, and I'm going to use these flat head bolts here that have this taper, and I'll put a bevel on the 2 holes here so that when this is all said and done, these will be flush with the surface of this. I'm going to drop these mounting holes down just a little bit. That way it pushes the license plate holder bracket up even farther. Just using the bottoms of these, getting it flush with those edges. So with the bracket all drilled and cleaned up, it's time to just put a finish on this. Normally, I would just take some black spray paint this thing, but I needed an excuse to go buy one of these inexpensive powder coating systems, and I'm going to try that. Well, I'm at the PSR, or point of safe return. I can't do anything further with this until I commit to cutting this flap. So I'm going to take mine over to the bandsaw and cut that off. You could use a Dremel tool. You could probably get away with cutting it off with some snips, just to stay away from that corner, and then you can sneak up on it with some sandpaper or a sander. So here we go. Here are the lights that I got to replace that OEM light. When I ordered these, I got 4 of these, and I'm just going to use 2. So I'll have some backups if I ever need them. They say these are DOT approved. They say these are good for exterior uses. I wasn't really convinced, so what I did is I took a piece of clear tubing that I had laying around, and I just cut off a sleeve and placed it over these lights. That'll give them a little bit of extra protection from the elements. Each light has a black wire and a red wire, and I'll tell you, these wires are very small. But ultimately, to hook this up, I'm going to hook the 2 reds together, the 2 blacks together, and then run a single black and a single red up to that wire bundle. I will have to cut off the OEM wire harness so that I can plug it back into that wiring bundle. To give myself a little further push out on these lights, get them further out here, I put the nut and the washer up against the light itself, and then I'm just going to rob that other set of the nut and washer to fasten it to the back. And I should just have enough thread here to catch. Be able to snug those up. Now we're just going to tie these wires together, red to red, black to black, and we're going to use solder on these connections. Now the OCD in me would love to match the color of the wires that are stock, but I don't have a long enough piece of red. So we're just going to use this blue to get me from the lights up to the wire harness. Before I run those 2 wires through this wire loom, actually it's heat shrink, I want to see if these are going to work. So I've just got a 12-volt charger hooked to the ends of these. Alright, I believe the finish line is approaching. Next thing I'm going to do is put the license plate bracket back onto this flap. So to put this back together, I'm just going to go in the opposite order of the disassembly process. So there's going to be a lot of this that I'm just going to do off camera. Remember though that there are a couple of these bolts that have, one of them's got an extra washer, and that's going to go up here in this corner. So we'll do that one, and then we'll do this one over here. And then from here on out, it's just a matter of putting these wires in the corresponding loop. Because we've moved this license plate light, we're only going to catch these two wires in one of these loops. Then we're also going to put the tail light back together. I've got all the wires put back. I've got all of the ones that weren't disconnected or cut plugged back into their corresponding connection. Now the last thing I need to do is connect these wires here to the plug that I cut off the old light. So the black is the ground, and that's going to connect to the black and yellow off of the plug. Now these are going to be soldered, and make sure that you get your heat shrink in place before you solder up these connections. Well, here we are all back together, and this is exactly what I was after. Get rid of that big flap, tuck things in nice and tight. Lights are working, everything looks good. Thanks for watching.